Good evening, folks. We are here with episode 5 of the Cold Takes Video Games Podcast. And this is going to be an unusual one. It is a solo show. It is just me, myself, and I. So I'm going to be here with you for the next 30 minutes. Earlier today, I put out a post on Twitter asking folks if there was anything they'd like to hear me cover. I got a couple ideas and a couple things I want to address and kind of talk about with current news and the direction I'm going with the channel. So kind of the first thing I want to get to is this podcast itself. A lot of people are constantly asking, am I going to include video? Am I going to cut in like trailers and gameplay? And some of that can be useful. I just did a show with Scorpio Caesar. And I really enjoyed putting in all the pictures of his collection, of his action figures and games, and a couple of mine. But honestly, that's not the point of the show. I'm trying to make something here that you guys can kick back to while you mindlessly, play a game. One of the mutuals that I have with Ali, Hectendo, was saying he listened to one of the podcasts while he was playing Mario Kart. And that is awesome. That's what I'm looking for. Something that, my fans, the few of them that there are, can listen to in the car or while they're doing something they enjoy. So sometimes I feel like it may be prudent to put in, pictures or video examples of what I'm talking about, but I don't think it's important to what the aim and scope of the project is. And a couple of people have asked, hey, why don't you do like a vlog where you're on the camera? Honestly, it's not that I'm camera shy or anything, but I'm a 39-year-old guy. I'm not some Adonis, so, I'm nothing special to look at, I don't think. So I'm not trying to, really make this about... the same kind of content that I do normally on my channel, where I might be featured, or I'm doing little skits, or doing my evil Santa, or my Haunter character that I did around Halloween. This is really about just talking about the games that we enjoy, and me getting the great honor of sitting down and interviewing my friends in a radio-style show. And anyone who's listening, whether you're a small content creator, a big content creator, whether you're just someone that likes to listen to us and watch us, I want you to come on because you have stories and you have experiences that other people probably want to hear, that they could enjoy. So if anyone is interested, you know where to reach me on Twitter. You know where to reach me on YouTube. Many of you have, other contact information for me. If you ever want to come on, I'm totally open to having anyone on the show that can contribute to the nice little community we have here. The second thing I wanted to touch on was the community itself. So I have probably, 30, 40, 50 good friends that I talk to on a fairly regular basis. And we have good discussions. We interact with each other's content, whether it's on YouTube or Twitter. And let me tell you, man, I love this community. Again, I do pretty well on Twitter. I got over 1,000. I'm almost at like 1.1 followers. I'm still working on YouTube. It seems like a little bit of a grind. I haven't quite caught on yet, but we are at I think 128, and I want to grow that. But I'm having limited success, kind of cross branding that with Twitter. It feels like a lot of people on Twitter either just pass by those, little adverts I put out, or they end up unfollowing because they get sick of seeing them. But this community on both sites is incredible, and the little interactions that I have with each of you every day are incredible, and they really do mean a lot to me. And I'll tell you the truth, and I was kind of posting this earlier on Twitter, I am pretty much a recluse in real life. I have a good job. I work full time, and then I come home and kind of hide away. So I'm not really the most outgoing person in real life. So it's been great to develop some real true friendships with people like Brandon and Emily and Allie. Hell, Allie is easily my best friend. We talk every day. She's like a sister to me. And she's someone I met on Twitter and YouTube. And I think a lot of people don't put enough emphasis on those interactions that people have. And you know what? We don't just talk about games. We're there to support each other for issues we're having in our lives. So it's great to have another person to talk to and to reach out to. And I feel the same way about a whole bunch of people. You know, I want to shout out Andy B, Scorpio Caesar, Red Viking, Brandon, Emily, so many of you. You know, I posted my circle. You know, if you're on there, you're someone that interacts with me, and I love interacting with you guys. So I just wanted to say thank you. And, you know, it really can't be beat. I enjoy this. You know, whether or not it's incredibly successful, I enjoy every minute of it for sure. And I'll tell you, it's been a wild couple of days on Twitter. You know, talking about all the games coming out and, you know, me talking about all the podcasts we've been doing. So, you know, we've been having a lot of great interactions. I just recently started another playthrough of Fire Emblem Three Houses. And I'm really, really enjoying it, kind of doing it in preparation for Fire Emblem Engage. I'm super excited about that. But I'm just having a great time playing through and, you know, focusing on a whole bunch of characters that I didn't necessarily focus on the first time through. You know, I'm having a real great time, you know, playing, of course, with Claude. He's my favorite. But, like, you know, Marianne and Bernadetta, it's great. And I was talking to, you know, people about the alternate paths and story things that can happen with them today. I'm really enjoying the game, and it's really getting me hyped up for Fire Emblem Engage. And, you know, when that comes out in a little bit, I'm actually going to be on vacation. It's going to come out during the second half of my vacation. So I count myself pretty lucky that I'm going to be able to just jump into that and, you know, hide away in the house and put hours and hours in a row into it. So I'm really excited about that. And there's so many games that I've talked about with the folks on my podcast over the last couple of weeks. This year is going to be crazy. It's going to be so crazy. Whether you love horror games, whether you love JRPGs, it's going to be insane. You know, just looking at, you know, you got the Silent Hill stuff coming out. The Silent Hill 2 remake hopefully will come out before the end of the year. The other two Silent Hill projects they were working on. The Resident Evil 4 remake looks incredible. I know, like, when I was watching that initial trailer and you see Dr. Salvador coming at him with a chainsaw and he parries it with, like, a knife. And I was like, this is going to add an incredible layer to a game that was already incredible. So I am incredibly hyped for that. And then, you know, I've talked about it incessantly. The Fatal Frame series is easily my favorite series ever in horror. And, you know, I'm not the kind of person that goes and get ROMs or, you know, downloads things from possibly nefarious websites. So I never got to experience Mask of the Lunar Eclipse. And, you know, I've seen video of it and I've watched, like, little pieces of playthroughs, trying not to spoil it, because I hoped one day it would eventually come. And to know that that day is coming, I am so excited. I can't even imagine what it's going to be like. I know how I felt when Maiden of Black Water dropped on the on the Wii U, and of course later on other consoles. Really had a great time with that, and I'm looking forward to that same kind of experience, but even on a deeper level, because as many of you know, last year I did a Fatal Frame retrospective with Brandon from Just the Gems, and it kind of brought me back into those games that it had been years since I played. Like, I actually was playing the PlayStation Store versions that were on the PS3, and it was incredible. Even playing those games, even with some of the performance issues they had running on the PS3. And then, of course, you know, fully playing through Maiden in Black Water again for one of the sections I did in the video, it really brought me back, and it was really at the right time to get me excited for this. And yesterday on the podcast with Scorpio Caesar, he enlightened me to the fact that it has been announced that PlayAsia will be doing an Asian English release. So that is going to be huge. I didn't honestly expect that we would get a physical, and I usually don't deal with those companies, but I absolutely will, because that's something I have to have on my shelf. Hell, I might even find a way to display it on the wall. I'm that crazy about the series. So that's going to be huge. And I really, guys, if you haven't played that series, or you only played it for a little bit a long time ago, I think this is another great re-entry point. You can get really excited like I am about it. And I've been telling people, if this game does really well, I would not be surprised for them to announce a Fatal Frame 6. If it doesn't do well, I fear that it may be the end of the road for the series. So I need all of you to go out there and buy it digitally and pre-order it on PlayAsia as soon as that's available, because I would love to have another entry in it with an original story. I think that we're kind of having like a little boom on survival horror, and I think they could really capitalize on that if this game does well. So that's super exciting, and I'm really looking forward to that. There's a ton of the Tales games coming out. There's a ton of Trails games coming out, and I'm not super crazy into those, but honestly, with the people I have around me that are so into RPGs, they get me excited about this stuff. Like, I was never a Xenogears or Xenoblade person, and having all these people and all the hype around it got me into it, and I really enjoyed it. And I fell in love with characters like Noah. Literally one of my all-time favorite characters in an RPG now. And if it wasn't for the excitement, the palpable excitement and tension that I felt from people being expectant of that release, I never would have experienced that, and I never would have got to, meet this incredible character. So I really like to feed off other people's excitement, and I hope I can generate some for some of these games, like the Fatal Frame games that are coming out. So it's going to be a hell of a year, I'll tell you that. One of the other things that folks had asked about on Twitter was to kind of touch on what got me into gaming. And I know in my podcast, I always talk about that with the guests, but it's not really about me, so I only have like a limited time to go over it. So I'm going to go a little more in depth about, my kind of memories and histories with games now that I'm here alone. Thinking back, I told the story about inheriting the ColecoVision from my sister and playing all those old Atari-style games, and then eventually breaking the system and actually playing with the telephone-like joypads, like they were walkie-talkies, or like, giant cellular telephones. And then, we had a Nintendo. I specifically remember games that I really, truly loved, like River City Ransom. And that's one of those ones, and I think a lot of people experience this. When I was younger and playing it, I really could never get very far in it. And I'm talking about being 7 or 8 years old, maybe 5 or 6. And I didn't have the knowledge and the wherewithal to realize that I could repeatedly buy the foods to upgrade my abilities and get stronger. And it's something I revisited later, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. And it felt good to like max out and like easily whoop everyone's ass. That was a really incredible feeling. So that wasn't the only game like that, though. There's just so many great ones. And we were a big renting household. And in our town in New Hampshire, we had actually, believe it or not, 2 or 3 different rental places. We had a Blockbuster and 2 local ones. And I used to love going in there and picking up different games every weekend. And sometimes I would rent, I'd re-rent a game to give it another try. But I remember falling in love with games like Maniac Mansion and, Shadowgate, the Friday the 13th game. Some of those were incredibly hard, for the age I was at when I played them. But they were so fun. I can't even describe how much I enjoyed things like RC Pro-Am, Track and Field, and I'm not really talking about the mainline titles because every kid enjoyed Mario and Mario 2 and Mario 3. To get to go every weekend and choose a different game. And every once in a while, they'd have a new game. More so at Blockbuster. But even at the two smaller ones, you'd have like a new game show up and you had to try it. I remember there was a tubing game where you were like tubing on like white water rapids. Games like The Adventures of Lolo. And I remember even enjoying renting like Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. because it was just a different experience. Very rarely did we get to buy games. So it was pretty neat to pick a new one and give it a try. And then we went into the Super Nintendo and it was the same thing. I would say that as I was getting older, I had more games that I actually owned, but there was so many, or at least it seemed like there was so many more games available to rent as this stuff was getting more popular. I remember loving games that I look back on that are terrible, like the Home Alone games and Cool Spot. Those were awful games, but at the time, I really enjoyed playing them. And of course, I've told many people before, the Super Nintendo was really when fighting games were starting to come to home consoles en masse. And I was in love with Street Fighter. I was in love with Mortal Kombat. I remember, how it was just like sweat and spit coming off of them instead of blood in the Super Nintendo. There was so many incredible games. And on the Genesis, too, things like Vector Man. And the Genesis really had incredible sports games. I remember I was obsessed with World Series Baseball. Baseball has always been a huge, important part of my life. But World Series Baseball, with those like digitized graphics that they put into it, it was like head and shoulders above like RBI Baseball or any of the other ones that were on the Super Nintendo. Though I did love Ken Griffey Jr. Baseball. It's probably one of my favorite games of all time. But even just with baseball, Frank Thomas Big Hurt Baseball, there was so many games just for sports. NBA Jam, the NHL hockey games, they were all so incredible. And that did continue into like the PlayStation 1, things like that. But that was really when fighting games and sports games were kind of coming into their own and were much better than, the black label like baseball and ice hockey games that we were playing on the Nintendo. And then, just like a lot of people, the PlayStation absolutely changed my life. And again, it's not about first-party titles. I've said on numerous videos and all of the podcasts how Resident Evil and everything changed me. But when I think of games like Jet Moto, and I think they made like 3 of them, and I ate every single one of them up. And on the N64, Wave Race, I loved water racing games. But back to the PlayStation, I adored Crash Bandicoot. I adored Croc. I was obsessed with those stupid little furry gobos. Croc 2, I had to have it the day it came out. Those games were so special to me. And yes, Mario 64 was great, but I adored Croc. The PlayStation really started to win me over. And some of the stuff that came out on there is mind-blowing when you look back on it. Like Galarians, like Kodelka, so many of the, like tactical RPGs like Vandal Hearts, and of course Final Fantasy Tactics. And of course we can't forget, which I'm going to get to in a little bit, Final Fantasy with 7, 8, 9. I had a follower on Twitter say that they wanted to hear memories specifically about Final Fantasy, and I have many. I was completely obsessed. I totally have completed Final Fantasy VII, not even including Remake, more times than any sane person ever would. And I mean, beat all the weapons, got most of the characters maxed out, got all the limit breaks. I even remember making sure that I got Aerith's limit break, which you had to get her to like level 50 or something before she died in the story. And it was useless, but I had to have it. And if I remember correctly, her limit break like raised everybody and healed all status effects and fully healed everyone. But yeah, the PlayStation really changed the game for me. And of course, all the survival horror, Silent Hill, Resident Evil. I have endless memories that I've covered in my nostalgia videos on that. But it's really these other games that really helped fill in, because those first party games, they can only truly keep you entertained for so long, but you need more than that to fill it out. And things like Jet Moto and Croc totally did that for me. Things like Fear Effect, those games are all incredible. The PS2 comes out. I remember the first game I got was Summoner, and I loved that to death. It was like an isometric Diablo type of game. And then I got an Armored Core game, and then I had my introduction to Samurai Warriors and to Tecmo Koei. And I love it to this day. Any release that comes out from Omega Force, that's the the team that works on the Warriors game specifically, I am on it. Playing through Samurai Warriors 1 and 2 was life-changing. The grinding, the levels, and getting all of their final weapons. And that obsession moved over to Dynasty Warriors when I found out about those. And like I said, it continues to this day. I love it to death. And the tactical games they put out for them, Nobunaga's Ambition games, Romance of the Three Kingdom games, so great. That really changed who I was as a gamer. And later on, they had so many amazing Warriors crossovers, with Zelda and animes like Arslan and games like Fire Emblem. The Warriors All-Star games had a whole bunch of the Gust characters from like Atelier and characters from Ninja Gaiden. Like, it was so amazing. And it actually kind of drives me crazy because there's a lot of people that just down those games like automatically. And it's literally something I'll fight you over. Those games are incredible. You have to give them a chance. And I think you should. I think everyone should, because I think you're really missing out. And I think they're making it really easy for you by, taking, like honey sweet titles like, The Legend of Zelda and adapting them for you. But you need to get into them, every one of you. I think you'd really enjoy them. Then we're getting into modern, consoles, and I'm not going to go on about the PS3 and PS4. You can watch anyone's YouTube videos for that. But those were some incredible times. But specifically, I do want to talk about Final Fantasy. Because, honestly, no one had ever seen anything like Final Fantasy VII. And, we can look back at, like, the, horribly polygonal graphics set against, beautiful backgrounds and be like, oh, that looks terrible. But, guys, I can play that terrible blocky game for another 100 hours right now. And honestly, I know there's a lot of fanboys and fangirls for the remake. I would choose the original over that any day, for sure. Even with those blocky polygonal graphics. The music in those games was absolutely incredible. And for those of us that were not fans of Final Fantasy, when, before 7, we didn't experience 6, when it was out. Those games were more niche then. Final Fantasy 7 not only was an incredible game, but it brought these games to the forefront. And what a lot of people don't realize, if that game wasn't successful, you wouldn't be playing your Trails games. You wouldn't be playing your Tales games. You wouldn't be playing any of those games in North America on modern-day consoles if it wasn't for Final Fantasy VII. The characters, literally, dudes were falling in love with Aerith or Aerith. Literally falling in love, like she was a real person. And the same with Tifa. And the characters were so deep, and you felt for them. And the storylines, with like Barrett and Dyne and Marlene, and even some of the side storylines that people didn't really get into, like with Lucretia and, the birth of Sephiroth and the terrible things that Hojo did and misled her into. The game is actually beautifully dark. I was talking about, because a lot of times I cover a lot of horror stuff on my channel. It is extremely dark. When you look at Final Fantasy VII and then Advent Children after, Sephiroth and Kadaj and all of those like offsprings of Genova were literally carrying around severed body parts of a dead eldritch space god in canisters that are like leaking fluids and blood all over the place. The tragic death of Ares. I actually talked pretty in depth with someone analyzing the wound pattern that would cause. And for a blade to enter high in your back like that and come out in your lower abdomen, now I know the graphics at the time and probably like decency laws wouldn't allow it, but I want you to think for a second about how traumatizing it would be to see the person that you love killed in front of you, but that wound would literally have emptied all of her digestive and reproductive organs onto the ground. It would have tore her apart. And it would have been not only emotionally terrible to see somebody get gutted like that, but it would be a horrifying thing. And granted, yes, decency and graphical limitations, but I just want people to keep in mind how horrible that would have been. And if you look at Vincent's story and the things they did to him, and how Vincent was just trying to save Lucretia from what he knew Hojo was going to do to her in that program. And they literally turned him into a monster. And it is awful. And it's awful what happened when they went into the town and slaughtered everybody. There's literally so much that is tragic in that game that it can't even be described. And then when you include Advent children in it, literally the earth puts a damn curse, like a plague, on the people of the world and gives them that stigma where their skin is literally like turning to stone. And you see like children suffering with the affliction. And when you sit there and you have this line of thought, you're like, okay, so the greed and the hustle and bustle of everyday life and the dependence on Mako energy, which was actually, the life force of the planet that was literally from like the Cetra and long dead, like it's insane. It's insane to think about how awful what was happening in that game was. But yeah, the story is so deep. I could talk about it forever. That's just touching on the iceberg. I mean, in the beginning, you're literally, right or wrong, part of a straight up terrorist group. Avalanche are not good guys. And they may have been fighting for something noble, but they hurt and killed people that were innocent. You think when all those plates fell, whether or not it was assisted by Shinra, do you think that didn't kill a whole bunch of people? And do you think that a lot of the people that were working for Shinra were only making the best of a terrible situation? All of those guards that you killed and summoned Ifrit on were literally just trying to make a living, and you slaughtered them mercilessly. So there's a great big dark side to the game, and I love it. I'm not judging it. I think it makes it a deeper and more wonderful experience. And then when you get into Final Fantasy VIII, it literally, again, changed the game. So gone were the super polygonal graphics, and they look rough now, but it was something that we had never seen before. It was exceedingly beautiful, and the character design, specifically with Squall and Rinoa, was something that can never be topped. There was literally girls, again, just like with Eris and Tifa, there was girls falling in love with a made-up fictional character in Squall. And I think every male of video game playing age loved Rinoa. Like, weird, like, real-life crush love. It was crazy. And I won't say that I wasn't one of them, and you can call me a loser or whatever you want. But when you develop those kind of connections with characters in this game, when you see the things that happen to them, it's heartbreaking. And again, there's a looming darkness in that story. The basis of the story is literally child soldiers. Like, this is like Coney shit. Incredible. Now, looking back, I don't like the leveling system and some of the fighting mechanics, but at the time, that game had me enthralled. And what I love about those games is, as an adult now, especially an adult with like a mind that is a little darker than most, I can look back and see all of these incredible depths to these stories that I didn't see. And it's something so beautiful to look back on. That scene where they were dancing and it's playing Eyes on Me, that song to this day, when I hear it, like I get teared up. Like, and I'm a 39-year-old man, and I'm not afraid to admit that. Like, their love was timeless, and it was a beautiful thing in a PlayStation game. You know, you'd expect that out of like a romance movie or some, you know, play. No, it was in a PlayStation game. And that's why I always tell people, like, don't ever belittle the importance of video games as an art form, because they are endlessly valuable. So many great memories. And, you know, Final Fantasy IX, again, heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. What the Queen was doing and using Garnet for. The fact that even though we despised Kuja, he's not wrong. He has a reason to be upset. And you have to put yourself in their shoes to think, well, what would I do? It's crazy. It's really crazy. And that as well, like Freya. And the hatred and basically racism against her people, like the rat people. It seems like a silly thing to talk about like anthropomorphic, characters in video games, but that was a parallel about racism and how out of control and brutal it can be, especially if the government is behind it. I've talked to so many different people that were affected by parts of that game that I wasn't, and they found those stories to be personal. I have a friend that was greatly affected by Vivi's story. And I've read like whole write-ups on the parallels to our modern world with what happened with Freya and her people. And it's just crazy. It's just crazy that those games were so deep. And, even getting into Final Fantasy X, many consider that to be a masterpiece. I love the game. I'm not as crazy about it as I am, say, 7. But again, we're talking about timeless love. Timeless love. I would say that many people would probably rank that among the top, if not the top, love story that Titus and Yuna had. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking what was happening in that world. Yeah, there's no other way to describe it. So when you really look at all of these games, there's so much depth to them. And I really suggest reading up on people's like blogs, and people have literally written like college papers on these things. And they're so interesting because there's always more to discover. So that is one thing that I always want people to keep in the back of their minds. From my like dark place that I'm usually in, keep in mind how brutal and dark these games are, but also the positive emotions in them. And the great victories that happened over evil. All of the series have these things. You can find these things in, the Eve series. You can find these things in Tales and Trails. You can find, especially like in Fire Emblem, many of them that have like political intrigue and stuff, and you see the awful things that are going on, and when characters die in them, it's brutal. But Final Fantasy literally set the tone for all that. So as we're excited for Fire Emblem Engage coming out, and all of these Trails games coming out, keep in mind that if it wasn't for 7, 8, and 9, you wouldn't be getting those because they wouldn't have got made. So, that's really all I got on Final Fantasy. But, I love them, and I can sit here and talk about them forever, especially 7. But I didn't really want to go much over 30 minutes. So that right there is kind of like a little bit of my memories of my progression through gaming and me ranting about Final Fantasy and how dark it really is for about 15 minutes. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed listening. I hope I didn't bore you to death. And if you're interested in anything we were talking about, we can continue in the comments. As always, thank you for watching and listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, stay creepy.